So China joins the World Trade Organization, and since that time, we've lost so much. 70,000 factories. We will defeat the enemy on jobs, and we will defend American jobs. We're going to defend American jobs. And we have to look at it almost as a war.
All right, almost as a war. That's the kind of stuff that gets folks worried when they hear that kind of talk. Where President-elect Trump says he has a point here to talk about getting tough on China when it comes to trade. Former Senator Joe Lieberman, of course, the former vice presidential candidate as well, led the Homeland Security Committee, then its ranking minority member as well. Very good to have you, Senator.
Thanks, Neil. Good to be back with you.
Some military types have been expressing concern about the language that Donald Trump has used, not all, I should stress, in terms of dealing with China as an economic competitor and economic power, equating that with dealing with them as a military power. To you?
Well, obviously, they are rising as both a military and an economic power. And I think what the president-elect is really focused on is not breaking relations with China or getting into a trade war. Really, we're talking about having trade and business with the Chinese be more fair than it's been up until now. Our economies are really intertwined to the benefit of both. But in many ways, they've been taking advantage of us. And frankly, that's why I was personally very pleased when President-elect Trump spoke to the president of Taiwan, because it was another way of saying, not only to China but the world, we're going to play by American rules, not China's rules. Taiwan.
But we've agreed to this one China policy rule that you don't do that kind of stuff. I guess it's in the eye of the interpreter here. But so I'm hearing everyone flip a gasket about it. All I think he was doing was accepting a congratulatory phone call, but others have equated it to, an embarrassing diplomatic faux pas worse. What do you say?
I don't buy that. I think this is a fiction, a kind of strange rule of American foreign policy that should have been broken a long time ago. The Taiwanese are our allies. They have done everything we would want an ally to do. In my time in public life, they have become a great democracy. They're a market economy. We have a statutory obligation to protect them if they're attacked by the Chinese, and yet somehow...
Is that true? So in other words, China argues that Taiwan is just really a renegade province that should be included under its fold. If China were to force that issue, Donald Trump should militarily respond?
Well, that's the law. I mean, that's the law that's guided every administration since it was adopted decades ago.
If the Chinese attack Taiwan.
Yeah, but the reality here is Taiwan's our ally. So why, because it will upset the Chinese, do we say we won't even talk to the president of Taiwan? I remember way back in the 90s, during the Clinton administration, President Lee of Taiwan, who had graduated from Cornell University, wanted to come over here to attend his reunion, maybe speak at the graduation, and they wouldn't give him a visa. I mean, that's why, because the Chinese would be upset about it. So I think, and the reason I brought this up, Neil, is that I think that call between President-elect Trump and the president of Taiwan sent a message to the Chinese which will reverberate into our economic relationships and negotiations, which is that the old rules are broken, and we've got a new leader coming to town.
Well, that is exactly what the president-elect has said. If they're talking, I think this is something he tweeted out, but if they're talking about provocative actions, the Chinese is saying rigging their currency, militarizing islands in the South China Sea and elsewhere that aren't even theirs. They've been, long before this phone call with the with the leader of Taiwan, whose picture we're showing here, there was a great precedent for that, provoking us long before we provoked them. Having said that, real quickly, well, I've got you, sir, I'm sorry, but General John Kelly, the retired Marine general of the U.S. South Command head, is supposedly the pick to handle Homeland Security. What do you think of that?
So I can't say I know General Kelly well. I met him a few times. I believe he testified before the Armed Services Committee when I was on it a few years ago. The president's entitled to his choices. And everything I know about General Kelly tells me he's a good administrator, and this department, which I helped to create, needs a good administrator and needs tough policy to protect Americans at home from terrorism. It's done a really good job since 9/11, but the battle goes on. So overall, my reaction, pending knowing more, is positive to this probable nomination of General Kelly to head DHS.
Senator, always a pleasure. Thank you very, very much.
Mine, Neil. Good day.
Senator Joe Lieberman.